Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so excited to be introducing our first guest, Bob Olson, and he's here today to talk to us about his new book, The Magic Mala. So, welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm so happy to be here.
Hey, what a joy it is to have you here. Most people know you because you're this, amazing person that has really kind of dug into the afterlife. You've got a book, Answers About the Afterlife. And now this book comes out, and, I just had to have you on the show.
I'm glad you did. This is a pleasure, and it's a very different book than the last book, so I'm really excited to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, it's like night and day. I have to tell you, I have read, probably thousands of books over my lifetime. We're not going to talk about how long that's been, but I've read thousands of books, and your book had probably one of the most beautiful dedications I think I have ever read. The dedication you wrote to your wife, Melissa. And I understand she was the catalyst for this book even happening.
Yes, she was. She was. I didn't even know this book was going to happen. And in fact, for about a year, I had been either just wanting to be inspired by something. What am I going to write next? Because the last book came out in 2014. So by 2016, I was really itching because, I don't write real quickly, typically. And so I was like, all right, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I was waiting to feel motivated, feel inspired to something, and nothing was happening. And I struggled with that for about a year. And then in May of last year, for my birthday, my wife gave me this keyboard, and it's a Bluetooth keyboard, but it looks like an old typewriter. And so the keys are round and they're concave, and they have that clickety-clack sound when you type on them. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to play with this keyboard that Melissa gave me, and I did. But I was like, well, while I'm playing, what am I going to write? I really didn't know what to write, and I ended up thinking of this fictional story that was kind of based on my own life. I'll say loosely based, and I just started to write that. And I had no intention that anybody would ever read it because I had tried to write fiction in the past, and I got too overwhelmed with it. Anybody who's tried to write fiction, you read all the books and you recognize there's a lot of rules that you're supposed to follow, and you got to write out an outline, and I got way too overwhelmed every time I tried it. So I kind of gave up on the fiction. But since nobody was going to read this, I thought, I'll just write this out. And this book just started like flowing through me. And for the first day that I was supposedly just going to play with this keyboard, I wrote for about 8 hours. And this story was unfolding before my eyes. And I went to bed, and I was all excited. And I just couldn't wait to wake up the next morning to start writing again. So I could see what happened with these characters. And, I ended up doing this for about 28 days straight, even on the weekends. Normally I don't work on the weekends because my wife insists that I don't, to keep me balanced. And so I usually won't. But it was very funny because Friday night my wife said, hey, I made some plans for myself because I figured you're going to want to write. It was like she didn't want this to stop either, this flow that was going through me. And then 28 days later, this book popped out, and I realized there was something very special about it, and I knew, I guess I am going to share this with people. So, for the rest of the time, I spent months editing it and going through all the stuff that needs to happen before anything gets out to the public. But so it took about a year later it came out, and that's typical for books, but. Yeah, it was unexpected, and it was all because of this gift that my wife gave me.
Well, she's definitely a tremendous inspiration. And I know in your book, if you could give us just a brief description, because we want people to actually go up and pick up their own copy of the Magic Mala. I have mine, which I'm not sharing with anybody. So,
Okay. I know that. You don't get them back, right?
No. So, but can you give us like a brief description about the story being told in it?
Yeah. In fact, I'll just read it off the back cover. It says, "The Magic Mala is the story of Robbie Robertson, a down-on-his-luck writer who realizes that he doesn't know as much about life as he once believed. His desperate financial circumstances lead him to open his mind to new ways of living. After finding some mala beads, Robbie is taken on a magical journey that teaches him the secrets to personal manifestation and happiness." And this is something that actually happened to me. And in this, like I said, it's loosely based, but in the story, Robbie Robertson, I'm Bobby. Wasn't that far stretch there, but I used to ghostwrite books for other people, and when I was ghostwriting books for other people, ghostwriting a book would take anywhere. For me, it usually took about 8 months. Sometimes maybe you could get it in 6 months. With the editing process, you just never knew. It could take as much as a year. So, you would get a client and you knew it was going to last you for quite a while. Now, if all of a sudden you finished one and then you didn't have another client set up, you could be without an income for who knew how long. You just knew. And, this happens to Robbie, and all of a sudden he's going for months without an income, and his bills aren't getting paid. And even though he was a skeptic, as I once was in my life, a skeptic about all things, this is what happens in our lives. All of a sudden something bad happens like that, like, oh my goodness, I'm struggling financially and I just don't know what else to do. And you open your mind to new possibilities. And in this case, he found some mala beads. Now, a lot of people probably don't know what mala beads are. They're just like prayer beads. They're compared to the rosary beads. Most people know what those are. But mala beads have 108 beads. And from all practical purposes, because when I found my mala beads, in fact, my wife gave them to me. So here we go. Now I see a theme going on here.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this was 2005. She gave me my first set of mala beads, and she was the one who taught me how to use them. But she knew, it had to be very practical. So it wasn't about religion. It wasn't even really about spirituality. It was about just learning to express what I wanted in the world, or what I was grateful for in my life, 108 times, one for each bead. Rather than talking about the things that I was worried about in life or complaining about in life. And that's something that most people do very naturally, right?
Oh, yeah.
But what this does is it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to go through all 108 beads. And you sort of, you take one bead at a time and you just sort of think about what it is that you would like in your life. And that could be anything from health, to a new relationship, new love in your life. It could be something to do with a better career, or it can be manifestation. It can be more money. It can be that simple. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I like about the more money is most people want more money, but also if we recognize that this practice, this very practical practice, works for us for money, because that's something we can see immediately if it worked or didn't work, then we recognize, oh, well, if that worked for money, then now I know it can work for maybe my health or just my fitness alone, or attracting new friendships because I need some new friends in my life. And so I saw it from a very practical purpose, but it does have a spiritual aspect to it. And the spiritual aspect to it is just, basically, as you think about what you want on each bead, you're putting out into the universe, or you're expressing to God or Source, however you want to refer to it in your life. Some people think spirit guides or angels, and that doesn't matter, because the purpose of it is that you're expressing and thinking about what it is that you want, as opposed to, as I said earlier, thinking about what we don't want, which is can you believe that person said that thing to me? Or you're not going to believe all the bad things that have been piling up on me lately. You know, my car broke down, and I lost my job, and and we can go on and on about those things easily. But very, very, very few people are positive-minded enough to that when they get together with their friends, they're talking about things that they're excited about in life, things that they're grateful for in life, or things that they want to happen. I actually had a brother-in-law who wanted to rent a place in Boothbay, Maine. Now, that's pretty specific.
Yeah.
And he wanted to rent a place just for a week during the summer, and he kept talking about it, and he would run into people, strangers, and he would say, "Oh yeah, I'm they're like, what are you up to?" And he'd go, "Oh, I really want to rent a place up in Boothbay, Maine." And people probably thought he was nuts. But sure enough, and this only took like a few days, he walked into this store, and somebody asked him that question, how's it going? What are you up to? He says this thing to them, and the person who was standing beside him, waiting to be waited on next, says, "Oh, I don't remember what it was. It was a relative who has a place in Boothbay, Maine." And normally they're booked up, but a week just opened up because somebody said they couldn't come this year. And then I ended up going with him, me and Melissa, and going with him and his wife. I mean, this is sort of a great example of how this kind of phenomena works. And, most people would not do that. They just, you'd say to the person, behind the counter, "Oh, things are great. Everything is wonderful. Something about the weather, the politics, whatever." And then you'd move on, right? But this is how it works. But in this case, we're not just telling, the clerk. We're telling the universe. To me, I think that's the safest word that I can use. Telling the universe what I want in my life. And I spend 10 or 15 minutes doing that. And some people will do it daily. They'll do it in the morning and do it in the evening. Have you done it, Marianne?
Oh, I do it all the time, and I think it's such an important practice because it's easy to get thrown in the weeds when we have things that come up that might not look like the way we'd like our life to go, but end up being pretty much the instigator or the catalyst that moves us to a different plateau or a different understanding if we just, shift our perspective. So it's been really interesting. So like if someone goes, "Gosh, I hate my boss and I have to leave this work," or what have you, instead of focusing on the negative things, like how you were saying, they can switch that and focus on, hey, I'm going to manifest a place of employment where people value, appreciate, and honor me. So it's a different mindset, but it does change the energy of everything. So.
And a lot of people know this, right? But one of the things that I learned about readers of the Magic Mala are that it resets them to get back on course with it, or they start, they never had a mala before, or they had one but it's in the closet somewhere from years ago, and they pull it out, and you wouldn't believe the stories that are coming through, like just some really crazy stories that. They're miraculous, and they start working on them. One guy I know started working with his mala 45 minutes after he worked with it for about 10 minutes. He got this call from a talent agent who had rejected him 2 years prior. And for some reason, at this very moment, this particular day, they changed their mind and they called him up and said, "We'd like to represent you." And then he ended up having multiple experiences after that. I know a PR agent who was kind of tired and run down, the way I feel right now. After coming up with a new book about a month ago. And she said, I just wanted to take a few days off, and I read the Magic Mala, and so I decided I'm going to let my Mala beads do the work. And she actually... she did this exercise that's in the book that you go through each bead and you say, "Thank you for the blessings." Mm-hmm. This is something that I came up with when I was walking my dog back in 2005. Thank you for the blessings. And for each bead you go, "Thank you for the blessings," and you think of a blessing in your life. And by the time you finish, And this usually takes a little bit longer than most of the practices with your mala. By the time you finish, you've thought of 108 things that you're grateful for in your life. And let me tell you, when you do that, and it doesn't matter, they can be small things, they can be big things. You're like, you're a few feet off the ground. You feel great. But she went even further than that. So she would do that, and then she would think, I want major media to contact me about my clients from out of the blue. People I didn't even contact. I just want them, totally out of the blue, people who didn't even get an email or a phone call from me to contact me and say they want to have my clients, they want to interview them or they want to do an article about them or something. And sure enough, she ended up with the Wall Street Journal, 2 New York Times placements, Fox News. She had a whole list of them, and she kept sending them to me by email because she was blown away, but I was inspired by them.
I was about to say, I hope she's representing you. Come on.
Well, I should have hired her right there on the spot. But yeah, she's a friend of mine, and I just thought, oh my goodness, what a wonderful way to do that, because you get you change the vibration, you change your frequency really of the energy that surrounds you, your aura, some people will call, and you change that by doing the thank you for the blessings and thinking of a blessing 108 times, and then while you're in this wonderful state, you just think about what it is that you want. In her case, she wanted to take a few days off, so she wanted the mala to do the work for her. And it worked.
Well, and I think when we don't have to control everything, but we stay in that place of gratitude, which is the great lesson, I think one of the great lessons of your book, stay in this place of gratitude and manifest what it is that we're looking to either have or create in our life. Like you were saying, it shifts everything. It completely shifts everything. So you don't have to be a religious person, which this is great because this is just a more of a gratitude practice. It doesn't follow any dogma,
Yeah. Well, and that was important to me because I just did a book about the afterlife. And so in 2014, when I did that book, it's not religious. I wrote that as a private investigator who investigated the afterlife, someone who really came from a place of skepticism. I was just looking to see what the evidence was. And that book was like my final report, at the end of the investigation. Like, this is what I came up with, this is the evidence, and these are my findings. Religion wasn't a part of it at all. But because a lot of people associate the afterlife with religion, especially people who are very fanatical about their religion. I had to deal with that for a few years, and I was like, I don't want to do a book like that, and I don't want to do a book that's pushing people's buttons. And now I had that set in my mind when I was thinking about what I was going to write before this book came out. Now this book came out, and then it kind of, like I said, I don't even really feel like I wrote it in some ways. It uses so much of my life, but not in just the main character, in all the characters. Like, there's guys and girls, and there's a father, and there's even an Episcopalian priest in there, and the stories that they're telling are from my life. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them. So my life is within this story overall, but within all the characters, and I just feel as though whatever power it was, God, the universe, like spoke through me using my own life stories to tell this story, and it allows me in a way to sort of detach from that, because I don't really feel like I wrote it in that way, and in that way I think. Like, I don't even have a problem saying, I think this is a great book, like, I'm that detached from it, it's like somebody wrote that book and they used a lot of my stories, but I don't really feel like I was the one who wrote it.
Well, and I think, coming from the place that you come from, being this, skeptic who has gone through different life experiences, a lot of people can relate to that. And they look at it going, this is a path that I can that I can learn from or grow from, because I can relate to it so much. You probably get that a lot, don't you?
I do. That's just it. There's a character in the book who asks the priest, he had a dream, what we call a dream visitation from someone who had passed. This is a loved one in spirit who visits you in your dream. You don't know if it's just a dream or if they're really visiting you or what, but the character who had the dream says to the priest, I don't know if you believe in that sort of thing. And the priest says, look, I've had way too many experiences to say it's not true. And I think we all have. We've all had those kind of experiences. We might not commit to saying, I believe in the afterlife or I believe in these things. But, we've certainly had our own experiences. Have you had your own experiences?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I could write a book on it. I'm not quite ready for that, but yeah.
Yeah.
And once you have them, it's, because you can hear a lot of people explain their experiences, but until you have your own personal experiences, especially as a skeptic, then it's like, whoa, what just happened? You can't really, you could discount it and then live a life of a lie, but when something like that happens to you, it happens.
Yeah, well, that's it. And so, but the nice thing about the Magic Mala, it's written from this place, really this mindset of the main character Robbie, and he's still very skeptical, and he's just looking at evidence, but he's willing to try things, and he's trying things, and he's having results from them, and yet he's still questioning it, and he questions it for a long time, even though he's seeing results from this practice that he's doing. And, but he recognized, not to give anything in the book away, but he recognizes even when he's thinking in the negative, he recognizes he's a creative being, he's divine creation, in form because these things that he's worrying about, these negative things that he's thinking about are coming to fruition as well. And that's what you were talking about earlier. We need to sort of be conscious of our thoughts, and it goes beyond our thoughts, because even our actions are thoughts in form, right? I mean, it's like it's an expression of our thoughts when we take an action. So, one advice in the book is, if you want to create new friends, if that's an intention that you have, don't turn down an invitation to a party. That would be your action being in conflict with your thought. So we want to keep our thoughts in alignment with our actions, or the other way around. And a lot of us don't do that. We say one thing and then we do something else. And I've done that. And so I think what this book does, even for me, I don't put myself out as a guru, which is another reason why I say it. I'm very detached from this book. I read this book and I go, oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. I got to remember to keep my thoughts and my actions in alignment. So I'm not, asking for one thing and then sort of working against it in the actions that I take. Yeah.
Well, and I think, it sounds like, we're probably going to, for those that believe in this, great, but if not, you were just inspired. But it almost sounds like you were channeling this whole book to write it that quickly. That's insane.
Oh, I know. I got a lot of writer friends, a lot of authors who are friends. They were really mad at me. 28 days? What? Yeah, we're not hanging out with you anymore.
You're like, oh, you're making us look bad. We're gonna, But,
that's right.
What's interesting is the Magic Mala is actually, it's a perfect book for people who are looking, who are in business and looking for different avenues to create different openings in their life. And it's kind of interesting because it can touch on so many different levels. If someone's looking for personal development, maybe they want to, develop their business to a greater degree. There's not a segment of the populace that this wouldn't really pertain to.
I don't think so, and I agree. And being someone who's been entrepreneurial since I was a kid, really, and all the way through my life, I recognize that, not only have I used some of this practice in my life successfully, but I've done the opposite as well. And I can see where I worked against myself. But I can certainly see that, geez, if I had read this, so many years ago, that really would have made my life a lot easier. And that's really all it's about.
Yeah.
We're not promising miracles to anybody. It's about just try it and see. And, who is it? I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, I've been rich and I've been poor, and rich is better. And in this way, it's like a glasses half full for thing. Like, I've been a glasses half full thinker, and I've been a glass half empty thinker, and the glass half full thinking is better.
Mm-hmm. So where are you going from here, Bob? Because you're so talented. You've got so many different things that you do. I mean, obviously you're still engaged with a lot of interviews and talking with a lot of people about the Magic Mullah because it just came out. So where do you go from here?
Well, what I really think I want to do is, but I'm waiting. I usually feel these things. I trust my gut feeling. Some people call that intuition or whatever. I'm not ready to commit there yet, but I'll call it. My gut feeling is, and I trust that. I trust the way I feel about something, and that I'm kind of waiting for that. But the way it feels like it's going is that there's so much in the Magic Mullah. People, and it's one of those things like you could read it 10 times, you'll get something new out of it every time. But most books are like that. And I feel as though there's a lot of information in there, and you can walk away and be very satisfied with it. But there's going to be some people who just want to go deep. They want to go deeper. And everything that is taught in there is from are things that I've learned in my own life. And because I'm not the kind of person who would write about a book about something if there was no integrity in it. I wouldn't write a book about becoming rich if I were poor. I wouldn't write a book about understanding the afterlife if I had one reading with a medium. That kind of thing.
Yes.
So, in this case, I really feel as though there's a lot in there. It's not just about manifesting. It talks about beliefs and the beliefs that will hold us back and stuff. And I really want to help people go deep with a lot of the concepts that are in here. And I think that I might spend at least the next few years just working in that direction.
Oh, without a doubt. Well, if you end up on the road, and you and Melissa end up on the road teaching workshops, which I can easily see with this because it's such a profound book. Please let me know when you make it out west.
All right. Well, I want to get to Colorado, and Melissa does too, so that would be great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love to meet up with you guys. So where can our listeners connect with you and, kind of learn more about the Magic Mullah and the other work you do and be part of your community?
The best place to go is bobolson.com, BOBOLSON. I even spelled it OLSEN. I got both of those domains, so you can't spell it wrong. bobolson.com. Or I have a show, afterlifetv.com, that I've been doing since 2011. That's another place that people sort of can get to know me a little bit better. But bobolson.com explains everything that I do right there. So.
Oh yeah, well I've been a fan of your Afterlife TV for quite a few years and highly suggest it. So, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Oh my goodness, no. It's me who appreciates you for having me on, taking the time to just invite me. I was so excited when I saw that email come in. So I thank you.
Oh my goodness, you just made my day. Well, and definitely please thank Melissa for being the inspiration of this amazing book. We want to make sure she gets love too. So.
Yeah. Well, I certainly will pass that along to her. Thank you.
We're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074. 630-881-1074.
Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so excited we're spending this time here today. Our next guest is Robert Snow, and he's here today to talk to us about his book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you for having me on your show.
For our listeners that are new to your story, I understand in 1992 you went to a hypnotist on a dare. How did that change your life?
Well, actually, it took a long time to change my life. I had read a book previously about past life regression, and I happened to be at a party where one of the police department psychologists who works at the police department was there, and we were just talking about books we'd read and movies we'd seen. I mentioned this book, and she asked what I thought about it, and I kind of belittled the idea of past lives because at the time I thought it was kind of silly. I thought it was just a fanciful thing people wanted to dreamed up so they'd think nice things happen to them after they die. So anyway, I was really kind of maybe a little overboard. I kind of really put it down. I didn't realize at the time that she used past life regression in her practice. And so we got down. I kind of irritated her enough that she finally dared me to do it myself. And I didn't want to do it, but it got down to finally last year. You're scared. So, it's like, oh, you can't ask a man if you're scared. Of course I would. So anyway, she finally talked me into going for a past life regression myself so I could see if it was really silly as I thought it was. And so I finally did. I didn't really want to do it because I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. But I finally did go for a past life regression just because I had promised. I told her at the party I'd do it. But then I kind of, later I wasn't going to do it. But every time I'd run into her, she'd always ask me, have you done it yet? And I'd make some kind of feeble excuse. And each time I saw her, the excuses sounded worse and worse. So finally, I thought, well, I'll just do it. I'll get it over with. But I had a plan. I thought, what I'll do, I'll go there. I'll be cooperative as can be. I'll cooperate every bit with her, but I'm taking my own tape recorder along so I can prove to her how silly this whole thing is. And so I eventually went for the past life regression.
And so coming from you, because here you're a detective, you've been working with the Indianapolis Police Department for a period of time at that point. So I can understand you really looking for that evidence, like, okay, we're going to just prove this and being that skeptic.
My whole intent when I went for it was not to prove it, was to disprove it. And so I went for the regression, and for a long time, I didn't think anything was going to happen. I really thought at the time that I was too strong-willed. I wouldn't be able to be hypnotized. But needless to say, things don't always work out like you think they were. And
Yeah.
basically, she was able to take me back to several past lives. And the problem was not so much what I saw was as much as the clarity of it. I didn't realize I had what they call a full sensory regression. in which you not only see, but you can hear, smell, taste, and feel during the regression. And it was just extraordinarily vivid. I mean, so vivid that it really bugged me after it was over with, because I had always thought if you had anything come up during a past regression, it'd be simply buried memories from this life that have been buried in your subconscious mind. Because when you're under hypnosis, you actually tap into your subconscious mind. And I thought, well, all it would be some memories from this life. You bring up and reorder them a little bit to make a story. But the things I saw during the regression were so vivid and so clear that it really, really bugged me afterwards.
I can imagine. I've had some experience with kind of delving into the other side, and it kind of left me the same way, where everything was so vivid. I came back and was like, what just happened? It kind of throws you a little bit. So when you went back and you had this experience, was there like anything that really stood out to you? Like, gosh, I got to start investigating this. How did that affect you?
Well, actually, I went down to 3 past lives. And 2 of them were so far back in history that you couldn't prove it. One of them was ancient Greece, and one was back in the prehistoric days. So you really couldn't prove anything about those. That's so far back. Anything you saw, you don't know where it come from. It could come from a history book or something like that. But one of the lives I went to, Dr. Griffith, the lady who the psychologist who hypnotized me. I went to one life that was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and I saw myself as a portrait painter. But interesting enough, I kept telling Dr. Griffith, I'm painting portraits, but I hate painting portraits, but I have to because I need the money. And I said that maybe a half dozen times, how much I hated painting portraits, but I saw myself doing it as an art. I was an artist during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I said a number of things about this life. As a matter of fact, I ended up making a list of them. Finally, I said 28 things about this life that could be proved or disproved. Now, at the time, I didn't know who the person was. I didn't have a whole lot of confirmation. I saw a couple of paintings of his. One, interesting enough, and I went back to the doctor. Actually, I did 2 regressions to the same life. I went to that regression one time. Then at the end of the regression, Dr. Griffith told me, he said, go back to your most recent life, the life you were before you were Bob Snow. And I went back to the same life, to the artist. And during that regression, I saw him painting a portrait. But interesting enough, the portrait was of a hunchback woman, which I thought was kind of unusual. I thought, gee, how many paintings of hunchback women could there be? And I thought maybe and again, even at the time I was under hypnosis, I kind of wondered, gee, if I seen this painting somewhere in this life and just forgot it. But anyway, once I got out, the regression was over, and I tried to put it all in my mind. I kept telling myself, I know it was vivid, but this is just your memories from this life brought up, reordered to make it look like a story. That's all it is. It's nothing special. But I just couldn't seem to forget about them because they were so vivid. I mean, extraordinary. It was like I was there. It wasn't like I was just seeing this in my mind or was just daydreaming. I was there because I could feel, I could touch, I could taste, I could smell. And it was so extraordinarily vivid, it really bugged me. And I could feel myself actually becoming obsessed with this because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought about it every day, constantly. And so I finally decided what I need to do is find one of these paintings. I saw 2 different paintings by the artist. One is still life and one, of course, the hunchback woman. I thought, if I can find one of these 2 paintings, it'll come to me. That's where I saw it somewhere in this life. That's where I saw it at. And so I thought, then that'll be it. It shows that there's nothing to this past life thing. It's all memories from this life. So I set out to find one of these 2 paintings, and it started out to be what I worked at that time. I was in charge of the homicide branch, the police department. So I knew about detective work, and I knew how to do it. And so I set out this. I figured this would be maybe take a couple of days, week at the most, to find one of these paintings. Well, several months later, I had not found the paintings, and I couldn't understand it because they were so. I couldn't believe that I had just dreamed them up because they were so vivid. When I saw myself painting the portrait of the hunchback woman, I could see every brushstroke in this painting because when I saw myself doing it, I was just finishing it up, and I could see every single brushstroke in that painting. So I couldn't believe that I dreamed it up. I knew they had to exist. So I spent months trying to find, but unfortunately, this was back in 1992. This was pre-internet days, and so those days you just couldn't type, portrait hunchback woman in a search engine and find it. In those days, you had to go to the public library and pull books off the shelf. And that's what I did. I went to the Indianapolis Public Library and started pulling art books off the shelf and looking through them to find. I figured it had to be, because I've never had much interest in art or much experience in art, so I figured it had to be at least a semi-famous painting, or I've never would have seen it or remembered it. But it took me. I searched for about 3 months and went through every art book in the library, which incidentally they had hundreds. I had no idea they had hundreds of books. I went through every single one and couldn't find it. Well, I'm not willing to give up. I started visit. I thought, well, maybe I need to visit some bookstores around Indianapolis. They would have art books the library didn't. So I started visiting all the bookstores around Indianapolis and browsing their art book section. Still didn't find it. Then I thought, well, maybe I like in a lot of cases when you're investigating cases as a police officer, sometimes you find out you're heading down the wrong path. You need to stop and maybe look for a new direction. You're going down a path and nothing's happening. So I thought, well, maybe rather than books, maybe I need to go talk to some art dealers. If I talk to art dealers to describe the painting to them, I mean, how many paintings of hunchback women could there be? So I started visiting art garages around Indianapolis, and I found out a kind of an interesting thing back in the early 1990s. At that time there was no central list of paintings anywhere. What you had to do is just start calling art dealers. If you wanted a specific painting, unless it was a very famous painting, then you could find it. But for ordinary paintings, like I was looking for, there was no central list to tell where they are at. You just had to call art dealers. So I visited probably a half dozen or so, or maybe a dozen galleries right now, and talked to the dealers, but nobody could give me a clue where this might be. So finally, I even went to a new age bookstore in Indianapolis and bought a couple books on past life regression to read it to see for some clue there of what might have happened. And I even tried self-hypnosis, which is very difficult. I mean, it's one thing to have somebody else hypnotize you. Self-hypnosis is quite difficult.
Yeah.
But I tried it, and it's actually twice. I felt myself going into the same state I was in Dr. Griffith's office, but it only lasts for just 2 or 3 seconds. Interesting enough, both times, as I went into it, I could see the number 1917, and then it'd be like a balloon pop, and they'd be out. Both times, and I didn't know if it was just a number, amount of money, an address, or what, a date, or what it was. Just 1917. So finally, and even as a homicide detective, eventually there comes cases you're not going to solve. There comes, no matter how good you think you are, and what good kind of clearance rate you have, there are cases you just don't have the evidence to solve them. And I finally figured out after months and months of looking into this case, I just figured that's what's going to happen. This case is not going to be solved. I need to shelf it and forget about it. What we do with homicide cases is when you're investigating, if you have a case like this where you're investigating, and it leads absolutely nowhere, you don't just throw the case away. You deactivate it. You put it on the shelf. If you don't work on it anymore, but in the future, if new evidence would come up, then you reopen the case, look at it again. Mm-hmm. So I figured I put this case on the shelf. I couldn't think of anywhere else to look, any more evidence. So I basically just gave it up. And so I thought, well, I'm just not going to solve it. Little I know that didn't come true.
Well, and there couldn't have been a more perfect person for this experience to happen to, with your background and how you're investigating things, and just that drive to search out, the truth. I really commend you for that, because most people probably would just kind of like, oh, we'll brush it off. But you had this great curiosity that just drove you to find out more information and more information.
Well, the problem was it just looked like a challenge in my investigative skills, and I thought I could meet the challenge, and it really bugged me when I found I couldn't. Mm-hmm. But anyway, a couple of months after I'd given up the case, it was getting toward my wife and I's anniversary, and she wanted to go on a trip somewhere for our anniversary. And I thought, that's like fun. So one day she called me and said, what do you think about going to New Orleans? Well, neither one had ever been to New Orleans, and it sounded like a fun thing. Our anniversary is in April. Nothing would be a good time to go there, but it wouldn't be too hot yet and all. So we took our trip to New Orleans. So we spent a week there, and we had a great time and everything. Anyway, we used to go into the French Quarter. Anybody's been to New Orleans knows that's where all the bars and the bands and everything are. And we'd always go at nighttime. And I always noticed on the way down there were lots of really neat shops in the French Quarter. But, of course, they are always closed by the time we went to hear the bands and go to the different bars and everything. So the last day, our plane didn't leave till evening. So I suggested to my wife, why don't we go window shopping in the French Quarter? Look, I go see some of these shops, go visit some of these shops. So we did. We were just doing a lot of window shopping. And anyway, we finally got to Royal Street. In the early 1990s, this is actually early 1993, Royal Street in New Orleans was mostly art galleries. And so we started visiting. They had some beautiful, beautiful paintings in these art galleries. And we were going just walking down the street, just walking in, just glancing. We weren't going to buy anything, certainly, but just looking at paintings. So anyway, I noticed as we were walking down the street, the shops are getting smaller and the paintings and painters more obscure. So finally, we get to a little bitty shop on the very, very end of Royal Street and walk in. It's a 2-story, and it said modern art upstairs. My wife went upstairs. She likes modern art. I never have. So I'm just walking along the first floor of the thing, just looking at the paintings, not paying much attention. Just looking at them. I didn't recognize any of the artists or any of the paintings. And anyway, I'm getting to the corner, and there was a portrait sitting on the easel in the corner. I'm just walking by, and I glanced at it, and I walked by, and it's like I went into a glass wall. I stopped so suddenly. And I turned around, and it was the portrait of the hunchback woman. Now, there's been times in police work when I've been frightened. And don't kid yourself. What you see on TV, police work can be very scary. And at times I've been very frightened. But about the police work, about being frightened, is you know what to do. You know there are certain things you need to do. But but in this case, I was frightened because I had no idea what to do. I mean, you spend these months and months of searching for something. What are the odds that you could just stumble onto it by accident 1,000 miles from home?
On vacation.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't believe it. And so I'm looking at this painting. I keep telling myself, no, this looks like the painting. But that's funny. For several years after my regression, I closed my eyes. I could still see things vividly clear. Matter of fact, for several years, I closed my eyes. I could still see every brushstroke in the painting. And I kept first telling myself, no, this is not the painting. It just looks like it. It's not it. So I closed my eyes and I could see the painting in the regression of my eyes, and it was the painting. So then you're kind of feeling, gee, maybe I've had a stroke. Maybe I'm actually in a nursing home somewhere. You just think you're seeing this. Because things like this, things like this happen in movies. They happen in books. They happen on the X-Files. They don't happen in real life. Yeah. In real life, things like this bizarre don't really happen. Again, they happen only in fiction. So I for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I'm just standing there at the painting, and I had no idea what to do. I had absolutely in the police work, like I said, if you're in a scary situation, you have training and experience, and you know what to do, what's your best option, what's the best thing to do. But in this case, I had no experience, no training. I had absolutely no idea what to do. And so I just stood there for several minutes during painting. Well, apparently one of the salesmen saw me stare at the painting for a long time and thought, hot dog. Kind of cut. So anyway, he comes over and said, well, he said, I bet you think how nice I look over your fireplace. I thought, yeah, that's what I want, a picture of a hunchback woman over my fireplace. But anyway, I said, I don't recognize the artist. Who is it? And he said, hang on a second. He said, I got a little bio of him here. So he went over to his desk and started thumbing through it. And he pulled out this bio. And the painter's name was J. Carroll Beckwith. Now, I'd never heard of J. Carroll Beckwith. But interesting enough, I read the bio. And I immediately found 5 things that I'd seen in my regression. Mm-hmm. The thing was very unsettling, but I'm trying to tell myself, Bob, settle down. Now, this is a coincidence. This is a heck of a coincidence, but there's got to be an explanation, got to be a logical explanation for it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I wrote down that I wasn't going to buy the painting. I think they wanted I found out buying paintings is like buying a used car. The price on the painting is not the price you can pay, but still, I think they wanted like $5,000 for it, but there was no way I was going to buy it because I was still convinced that I had seen it somewhere in this life. And then I figured if I investigated, I would be able to find out where. So I just took down all the information about the artist, and I thought, well, I'll go back to Indianapolis, I'll go to the library, I'll research this guy, then I'll know. I'll say, oh yeah, that's where I saw that. That's how I know about it. So I went back to Indianapolis, and what I did first, though, I listened to the tape of my past life regression with Dr. Griffith, and I wrote down everything that could be proved or disproved. I found I had 28 things I had said that could be proved or disproved, and so. But now, all right, I'd already checked off 5 of them in New Orleans. So I went to the Indianapolis Public Library and tried to pull out some information on J. Carroll Beckwith. And I found out there was very, very, very little information about him. He was just a portrait painter who lived during the late 1800s, early 1900s, but never did anything famous. Nobody would know when he was painting. None of his paintings are famous. None of them are world class pieces or anything. He was basically a portrait painter mostly. He made his living painting portraits. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they had very little information in the Indianapolis Public Library. Maybe everything together would be a half page, and it was only a major book. So the librarian told me, he says, "Why don't you go up to the Museum of Art Library? They have a much more extensive art library up there. You'll find more information on him up there." And so I went up. So I went up to the library at the north side of Indianapolis, the art library, and I went to there, and they had a little more information on him, but not much. But still, the information they had, I found 5 more things I had said in regression I could check off my list.
Wow.
And it was really disconcerting because I tell you what I was really looking for. I was looking for the one thing I had said that wasn't true. For example, I had said, Dr. Griffith asked me, he says, "What did you regret about this life?" I said, "Well, I regret we didn't have any children because my wife couldn't have children." So I thought, well, if they had children, then this whole thing there's something wrong. It's all goofy. It's not real. If he had children, then it's not real. There's something big goof up. Because if it's a real past life, you wouldn't make a mistake like that. I had saw him drinking wine during the regression. I thought, well, if he's a teetotaler or didn't drink wine, that would be it. Also during the regression, just before it was over, I don't know where it come from. I just suddenly I felt this overwhelming grip of emotion on me, and I said, "She died of a blood clot." The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Now, I had no idea who this was. I only knew it was a woman, very, very important. And I said it. And so I thought, well, now, if nobody important woman in his life died of a blood clot, he didn't drink wine, she had children, then I could prove it. I could prove it's wrong. There's something wrong here. This is not really a past life because you would mistake things. So anyway, I found I didn't get much of the public library or the art museum library, but I did find on a footnote at the art museum library that Beckwith had kept a diary almost his whole life, and that the National Academy of Design had never been published, but they kept it on file in the archives of the National Academy of Design in New York City. And so I inquired about that. I thought, boy, that'd be a great place. I could disprove these things. And again, that was my whole intent at the time, not to prove it, to disprove it. And so I actually they found they didn't get the diary with the Lady by Barbara diaries because they were very old and fragile. They did have microfilm of it, and so I ordered the microfilm of his diary. When it got to Indianapolis, when it finally came to me, I found, to my very dismay, he'd kept a diary from age 20 till the day before he died at 65, over 17,000 pages.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's a lot to research.
What I eventually ended up doing, I eventually ended up reading every single page. I finally it got to the point where I kept because first I just started skimming the diary. For some reason he had actually taken out part of the diary and typed it. I have no idea why, several pages. So I read that. And he also had started to write an autobiography. He died in October of 1917. Which I thought was kind of interesting since the number 1917. Mm-hmm. But he had actually moved to Santa Barbara in the spring that year and started writing an autobiography. But he wasn't well then, and he only finished I think it was like 20 pages or less of the autobiography. It wasn't very much at all. So finally, the problem was every time I'd read the diary, I would find one more little confirmation. Never what I fact. So it got to the point. Finally, I had the hard copies made, the microfilm, all 17,000 pages, and I read every single page. And the problem was, again, I kept finding one little confirmation. For example, I told Dr. Griffith that when I first saw myself, that I had a fancy walking stick, and sure enough, his diary, he said he had a fancy walking stick. And in his diary, 1912, he talks 3 different times about painting the portrait of the hunchback woman. Now, I also said that he couldn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. I said we didn't have any because she couldn't have children. So you think, okay, that would be a clincher if she did have children. Well, it didn't. It turns out his wife had the first marriage had a very, very difficult miscarriage and couldn't have children, and they didn't have any children from then on. But what finally pushed me over the other side and made me believe, gee, maybe this is true. I finally got to December 5th, 1886. There were only 2 women in Beckwith's life. I told you I said that she died of a blood clot. I didn't know who it was, but I knew it was a woman extraordinarily important to him. And reading Beckwith's diary, I knew there were only two women. That'd be either his mother or his wife. He his mother. She was the only one in his family who actually encouraged him to be an artist. His father had always told him that was the best way he knew of starving to death was being an artist. But his mother actually encouraged him, and he loved her dearly, and he loved his wife. Well, when I finally got to December 5th, 1886, I read the entry. His mother went to church that day and died of a stroke caused by a blood clot.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I think after that, I think that pushed me over that way. I mean, there are a lot of things you can imagine and maybe guess and imagine. You're not going to imagine 28. And actually, I ended up finally proving all 28. Every single one. I confirmed every single one.
And even from like with the portrait, I mean, that had been in private collection for years.
Yeah.
And there's no way you would have been able to have seen that before.
The point is, I mean, you can make lucky guesses. Sure, you can. You can guess 3 or 4 things and be lucky and get right them. For example, I kept trying to convince myself that during the investigation. For example, when I saw him die, because Dr. Griffith took me to his death, I saw it was fall of the year. Because I could tell it was a blustery night, and but the tree still had leaves. And also, I rose out of my body through the roof. Like, at that time I thought that's what I do. I could see it was in a very large city. And he died in New York City in October. But I kept telling myself during the investigation, hey, every year a fourth of people die in the fall, and a lot of people die in big cities. It don't mean anything. I kept trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, lucky guess. But after a while, when I got to all 28 of them. There's no way. There's absolutely no way you could guess these about somebody that obscure, because there are no books about Beckwith other than my book. There were no magazine articles about him. There was absolutely nothing about him because he simply wasn't that important. He was just a minor painter who lived and made a living painting portraits and died. Mm-hmm. There's no way you could guess correctly and not get one mistake out of 28 things about a man's life that is not recorded anywhere.
It was just astounding, your book, just with the similarities. I mean, gosh, you guys even have some similar facial, features.
I've heard that, but I just don't want to. I've heard people say that. I don't know. I don't see it, but I've heard people say that. They look, that there's some similarities. I don't know. I don't see the purpose of that between lives. But then again, I didn't believe in past lives either. So I'm not going to doubt too many things without looking at them closely first now.
Yeah. Well, and especially with your background, I mean, you're like the perfect person for this to happen to, because for people who are maybe new to past lives and have had an experience, it kind of gives them some understanding that you do your own investigation, you find out the information, what you can, and then draw your own conclusion. And when you have so many things like you've had, I mean, it's hard to deny that actually happened.
It got to the point where in police work, and like in homicide cases, eventually sometimes you're going along a path. You're just sure this person did it. You're heading along a path. Occasionally you say, whoa, you put the brakes on and realize you're going the wrong way. This person didn't do it. You go the opposite way. Well, that's what this was. My whole intent was to prove this was not true. Past lives was not true. It was just a fanciful idea people had to make things look nice after you die. But then eventually I had to stop and think, well, boy, hang on a second. I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my investigation leading the wrong way. It looks like there is some proof for this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so once you discovered all this information, I know it was a little while before you came forward with it, because your wife, she, like most people would say, well, you don't really want to bring that out because it could jeopardize the work that you're doing.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, actually, my wife was. By the way, she was also a police detective. She was a child abuse detective at the police department. And when I first told her, number one, she didn't believe me. I think she thought I was crazy. And I said, wait a minute, now look at all my information and everything. And anyways, she looked at it and she said, well, no. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, you've read or seen something about in the past, just forget it. I said, I'll find it and show you. Now, I was kind of glad she did that. I was kind of hoping that, because she's probably one of the best detectives I've ever met. She was an extremely, extremely thorough detective. So I thought, great. Because sometimes because in police work, one of my biggest advices to my officers is don't get emotionally involved in your cases. If you get emotionally involved in your cases, you get tunnel vision. you can't see things that you should see because you're so emotionally involved. But I knew in this case, by the time I told my wife what was going on, I was very emotionally involved, and so I was really glad to hear her say she wanted to look into it, because I thought they'd be a great. You got a third party with no interest in the case who's also trying to prove it wrong, and have her look at it. Well, she did. She did about a month investigation of this case, and she didn't find a single thing that I hadn't found. She could not find a single thing. But still, like you said, she told me, "Look, Bob, you're a police captain. Police captains don't talk about this. I don't care what you found. I don't care what evidence you have. Shut up about it, because it's not going to help your career if you go talking about this."
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, and really, I mean, because when you're so in, like modern world society, and then you start talking about something where people would be like, well, that's a little edgy or woo-woo or what have you. I mean, it could affect things. So, I mean, I'm sure it was just very great advice and kind of helped with all that.
Well, it was good advice from. I didn't follow it, obviously, because she was right. Things turned bad at the police department after my book came out and all the information about what I did come out. Things did not go well at the police department. No, they didn't. I mean, I was a civil service captain. They couldn't do anything about that, but they tried to make my life a little they may try to make it a little difficult, hoping I would retire, because I think I was kind of an embarrassment to them.
Well, I think instead, though, I mean, I look at this and go, gosh, what an enlightened individual to be able to have these experiences and share them. And it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do that, regardless what the norm is going to say. So I applaud you for doing that.
But police work is a very conservative, old-school profession. And I don't think they felt this ought to be something a police captain is espousing. I think they felt I should have followed my wife's advice and kept my mouth shut about it, just to kind of take it to the grave with me.
Well, I'm glad you didn't, because, I mean, it's a phenomenal story. And just looking at this and reading your book, which I highly suggest everyone go pick up a copy of your book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. And I know people can pick up copies of this book and other books of yours on Amazon. You have lots of books on Amazon. So, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in today. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.